So what if you could find a complete framework for growth? I'm talking about your career, your finances, your spiritual life, the whole shebang, all packed into a single sentence. Well, that is the powerful idea behind Increase on Every Side, a teaching from Apostle Joshua Selman. And believe it or not, it all starts with this one verse.
And here it is, Psalm 71, verse 21. Now, according to this teaching, this isn't just some nice poetic sentiment. No, it's actually seen as a prophetic promise, almost like a blueprint, suggesting that this kind of balanced, all-encompassing growth isn't just possible, it's what's expected.
So, you might be wondering, how do you get from that one single verse to an entire life philosophy? Well, that's exactly what we're going to break down here. First, we're going to look at why increase is even seen as a mandate in the first place. Then, we'll get really specific about what it actually means, uncover the principles that supposedly make it happen, and finally, we'll ask the big question, what's it all for?
Okay, first things first. Before we can even talk about how to increase, we have to establish the why. The teaching makes a pretty bold argument that this desire for growth isn't just some personal ambition. It's a core theological mandate.
The case for this mandate is really built on these four pillars. See, the argument starts with the fundamental nature of God, suggesting it's one of growth and multiplication. Then it points all the way back to the very first commands in Genesis to be fruitful. After that, it links to all these promises of increase that are scattered throughout Scripture. And finally, it grounds the whole idea in real-world examples. It's a case built from God's character, to His command, to His promise, to actual practice.
And for that last pillar, the demonstration, the teaching points right here. It presents Jesus as the ultimate model for this. He lived it by growing himself, he showed it with miracles like feeding the thousands, and he taught it in his parables. And that same pattern, that momentum, well, you can see it carrying right on into the explosive growth of the early church.
Okay, so if increase is a mandate, then we need to be crystal clear on what we're actually aiming for. What does increase even mean in this context? Turns out it's defined in a very specific and pretty demanding way.
So the definition is broken down into these four key metrics, right? Size, number, volume, and intensity. But the core idea is really simple. It's about constant forward momentum. The takeaway here is kind of relentless. According to this model, if you're not further along today than you were yesterday, you are, by definition, not in a state of increase.
And this is absolutely crucial. This isn't just about one thing, like money. The teaching is super clear that this concept of increase on every side has to be holistic. It applies to your spiritual life, to your knowledge, to your influence, to your faith. It's all about total, well-rounded growth. So that's the what and the why. Now let's get to the how. If this is the goal, what are the rules of the game? Well, the teaching lays out 6 specific principles. It calls them kingdom laws that are said to govern this entire process of increase.
And here they are. It all starts with connection to the source. That's then fueled by knowledge of the rules, which of course requires obedience to those rules, and faithfulness in the little things. This whole system is maintained through an attitude of thanksgiving, which ultimately brings you to the final principle, harvest, where you reap what you sow. Let's actually take a closer look at a couple of these.
The entire system kicks off with connection. This is presented as the absolute non-negotiable first step. Using that famous vine and branches analogy from the book of John, the teaching argues that real, true growth is just impossible if you're disconnected from the source. A branch just can't produce fruit on its own. Simple as that.
Next up is knowledge, and the teaching organizes it into this 3-tiered pyramid. And I want you to notice the order here. At the very top, the highest level is understanding God's character. Below that, understanding spiritual principles. And the foundation, which is still essential, is your professional skill or your secular expertise. That hierarchy itself is a huge part of the lesson.
And finally, we get to the principle of harvest, which presents growth as a really straightforward equation. What you sow is what you're going to reap. The idea is that these specific actions, or seeds, produce corresponding results, or a harvest. So diligence leads to prosperity, honor leads to favor. It's framed as a predictable and direct spiritual law of cause and effect.
Which brings us to our final, and maybe the most important question of all. Why? What is the ultimate point of all this growth? After all the principles and the mandates, what is the end game here?
Yeah, let's just put the question out there plainly. What is all this for?
The primary answer that's given is pretty simple. It's to glorify God. The teaching uses this really powerful analogy. Think about a coach. The
The coach is honored and glorified not by their own actions, but when their team goes out and performs brilliantly on the field. Well, in the same way, this framework suggests that a person's success and fruitfulness brings glory to their creator.
And there are two other purposes too, one that's internal and one that's external. So internally, increase acts as a consolation, a tangible encouragement for your own faith journey. And then externally, it equips you to be a blessing to other people, giving you the resources and the influence to actually make a difference.
So in the end, what this teaching proposes is a fundamental reframing of growth itself. It shifts the entire focus from a desire for more stuff to a spiritual journey of becoming. The ultimate goal isn't what you get, but who you become in the process, and what that then allows you to do for others. And that's the concept of increase on every side explained.